What historical event 100% reads like a time traveler went back in time to alter history? Edgar Allan Poe writes about an event 40 plus years in the future. https://www. mandatory.com/culture/1038388 An 1838 fictional tale by Edgar Allan Poe eerily predicted in 18. Basically, Poe writes about 4 people who are starving at sea, draw straws, and kill and eat the loser. Cabin boy Richard Parker. 40-odd years later 4 people are adrift at sea in a lifeboat. One drinks seawater and goes into a coma. When they draw straws for who will be eaten, the coma guy gets the short straw in a development that surprises no one. And so the 3 other men kill and eat the cabin boy, Richard Parker. Seriously, there was a shipwreck in 1664, a shipwreck in 1785, and a shipwreck in 1820. Each had one survivor. Each survivor was named Hugh Williams. A Belgian businessman was instrumental to the Manhattan Project's success. Realizing uranium's importance, he shipped 200 tons of it to Staten Island. When Lieutenant Colonel Nichols contacted him, he simply responded, "You can have the ore now. It is in New York. I was waiting for your visit." When Andrew Jackson's assassin attempted to shoot him, both of his flintlock pistols misfired. Andrew Jackson had to be restrained after almost beating the assassin to death with his cane. The 2 flintlocks were examined after the incident and found to be in good condition. I would say there is significant evidence Fidel Castro. Every single assassination attempt failed, sometimes because of wildly miscellaneous circumstances, including a sabotage diving suit that somehow got miraculously switched with someone else, who ended up drowning in his place. Dude holds the world record for over 600 attempts, I believe. Or the CIA agents reporting were making shit up to cover up that they spent the entire time drinking rum, smoking cigars and getting laid. The commando raid on the Norsk Hydro heavy water plant in Hardanger, Norway during World War II. The Norwegian commandos parachuted in during one of the worst blizzards on record, along with hundreds of pounds of explosives, and had to trek through the Norwegian wilderness for 15 days before they found a hunting cabin. The English commandos who were supposed to link up with got shot down, and the only reason they were able to make it to the cabin was that they found one of the commandos' sled, which he had lost as a child. After that they had to hole up in the hunting cabin for months, waiting out the weather. They survived on moss until, on Christmas morning, one of the men managed to shoot a deer. They went on to destroy the heavy water plant as well as sink the ship carrying what heavy water had been produced, effectively ending any chance Nazi Germany had of developing atomic weapons. The story is even crazier and less plausible than I've described, but I'm on mobile so I've left some things out. Cyanide gas attack thwarted in Tokyo subway 20. People could have died, but a worker found a burning gas bag in a toilet just before it mixed with another gas bag, just in time, and put them out. That was in Shinjuku Station. I was in that station that day, and that person might have saved my life. Probably not time travel, but very good timing. During the War of 1812, seems like a time traveler with weather control capabilities started a freak tornado that effectively ended the British occupation of Washington. More British soldiers were killed by the tornado's flying debris than by the guns of the American resistance. Franz Ferdinand's assassination. It was so much happenstance, shenanigans, and tomfoolery that it's like a special achievement in a Hitman game. Bomb that fails to explode. Generals don't want troops lining the streets to protect the Duke cause their uniforms weren't clean. Assassin not sure what's going on decides to go to a sandwich shop on the corner to get some food. Everyone decides how to get the Archduke out of town but neglect to tell the driver where to go, so when he doesn't turn, all the generals start yelling at him and he pops the clutch, throwing said generals off running boards, and the assassin just walks up and pops them both dead. Thank you for all the love. Wanted to add one more piece of info. My history teacher at university taught a history class covering between the American Civil War and World War I. For the assassination, he had recreated the entire downtown area of Sarajevo on 2 large pieces of plywood, the Apple Key running next to the Franz Josef Strasse. Really detailed. We spent 6 weeks tracing the routes the assassins took to get there, where they stayed, etc. The big drop was at the end when our teacher told us as part of his thesis on this. He went to Sarajevo in 1955 or so to finish his research, and one of his visits was to the World War I Museum in Sarajevo. While there he was speaking to one of the staff and found out that one of the conspirators, as part of his life sentence, was obligated to be the museum director and ensure the museum stays in working order. He was able to spend a couple weeks with him and was a trove of information not seen in history books. For the life of me, I can't remember the assassin's name. Da Vinci. The madman designed a tank in the 1500s. However, he designed the gearbox backwards to make any real version's wheels lock up and fail. He also designed a 12-barrel gun carriage, which is basically the machine gun on steroids, the early parachute, the double hull, the use of concentrated solar power, and a calculator. The man was several centuries ahead of his time. Tesla's AC polyphase system. 1 minute, we're in the Stone Age of electrical distribution, and the next, Buffalo. NY is being powered by the alternating current being generated at Niagara Falls by Telsa's Genius system. They were considering transmitting power from Niagara to Buffalo by pneumatic pipes or ropes and pulleys. I shudder to think about what that system would have entailed. Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived both the bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Reads like a satirical time traveler story where the protagonist screws up his dates. Not really an event but more of a couple of subtle, though significant, influences. Eli Whitney, the guy who invented the cotton gin, helped cement cotton as a major cash crop which drove even further demand for slaves. He, infamously, made no money off the development, as it was a simple and easily copied machine. But cotton helped drive the economic growth of the South. Frustrated, he eventually abandoned efforts to profit off it and went into the industrial world, where he was a small contributor to the development of higher precision machining and design, particularly for firearms. This in turn helped drive the growth of industry in the North, which was a major factor in giving the North the might and material to defeat the South. Eli Whitney inadvertently helped start and end the Civil War decades before it happened. What time traveler was giving that guy advice and pulling strings around him? The Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky was sentenced to death by firing squad, and just as they were preparing the groups to be shot, a messenger came with a letter from the Tsar forgiving them and the sentence was changed to prison labor. He later went on to write some of the most influential novels of all time. Fidel Castro's assassination attempts being dodged is so unrealistic, really, he dodged about 600, that it feels like a time traveler went back and foiled every single one of them. If the time traveler can control weather, the divine wind that stopped the Mongol invasion of Japan. Leonardo da Vinci, he could have been trying to get attention of other time travelers saying, hey, I'm stuck back here. If you read up on his life, you'll find there are so many times Adolf Hitler almost died, but somehow survived. That makes me think there was as a time traveler war going on. A faction trying to kill Hitler, because it's Hitler, and a faction preventing his death, because the guy who would replace him was even worse than Hitler. There have been at least 40 attempts to kill Hitler after he had risen to power. Sometimes they failed because the assailant couldn't get close enough, at least that's what they said afterwards. But a lot of them failed because of reasons that seem plausible if it happens once but begin to smell fishy when you look at all of them. Elzer's bomb went off as planned, but Hitler, who loved to hold speeches, had finished early that day. Tresco's bomb failed because at first he, as a high-ranking officer of the Wehrmacht, couldn't get his hands on anything that goes boom for months. And when he finally had some, the bomb didn't explode. Talk about German efficacy. Stauffenberg could have just shot the bastard. His attempt was part of a general upheaval after all, so his chances to survive that day would have been not that bad. But he planted a bomb because that went so well the last times, and so on. We will never know why, but somebody believed or even knew that a premature death of Hitler would have been even worse for the world than what we got. Or it was a wereaboo who wanted to see a tiger too. Who knows? Edit, I'm a bit surprised by the number of people who are trying to explain to me that I'm wrong. Like, dudes, I'm open for the idea that time traveling might not be real. Yet, my favorite failed attempt was when a Wehrmacht general was going to kill him with a suicide bomb. The general was in charge of a weapons depot, and Hitler was coming to inspect the equipment. The plan was to set the timer for a few minutes, then at the end of the tour grab Hitler in a bear hug and they'd both blow up. For some unknown reason Hitler was in a hurry. He sped through the tour in just a couple minutes, leaving before the bomb went off. The general had to run to the bathroom and race to disarm the bomb, saying he managed it with only seconds to spare. https://n Wikipedia org/wiki/Digby_Tatham Warder Digby and A Company managed to travel 8 miles in 7 hours while also taking prisoner 150 German soldiers including members of the SS. During the battle, Digby wore his maroon beret instead of a helmet and waved his umbrella while walking about the defenses despite heavy mortar fire. When the Germans started using tanks to cross the bridge, Digby led a bayonet charge against them wearing a bowler hat. He later disabled a German armored car with his umbrella, incapacitating the driver by shoving the umbrella through the car's observational slit and poking the driver in the eye. One greater than Digby then noticed the chaplain pinned down by enemy fire while trying to cross the street to get to injured soldiers. Digby got to him and said, "Don't worry about the bullets. I've got an umbrella." He then escorted the chaplain across the street under his umbrella. When he returned to the front line, one of his fellow officers said about his umbrella that thing won't do you any good. To which Digby replied, "Oh my goodness, Pat, but what if it rains?" 7. The American Civil War's first real battle was at Bull Run on land belonging to a Mr. McLean. After that he said, "Screw this. I'ma move to the country and avoid this fair." He moved to Appomattox Courthouse, VA, where Lee surrendered to Grant. In the McLean's living room, Mendeleev, who created the periodic table, was struggling to order the elements in a specific order/pattern. He then was able to order them like we see today after having a dream where all the elements fell into place, even leaving gaps for elements that hadn't yet been discovered. I know it's not exactly a major historical event, but it's been the foundation of science for over a century. But when I first heard, I thought it was a bit suspicious how it all fell into place. Edit. Whoa, this is literally probably my second comment ever, and it got to 3K upvotes at this moment in time. Thank you everyone. A book that predicted the sinking of the Titanic. Futility. The Wreck of the Titan. Futility might sound like Robertson was some kind of Nostradamus at first, but scrutinizing everything, it doesn't hold up. The route, passenger routes, as opposed to cargo routes, from England to NY, or Western Europe to Eastern US, was the most popular transit lanes of the day. If you were writing a story about an experience on a passenger ocean liner, that's the route you'd pick. The time of year, icebergs were a notorious hazard in the early spring. It wouldn't make sense to make it any other time of year because icebergs aren't a danger, or not nearly as much, outside of that time frame. The size and speed of the vessels, although it didn't exist when Futility was written. Ships that big that could travel at that speed was already the next big thing that is coming. The next step in ocean liner engineering was already being planned. It was just a matter of who could establish the infrastructure to build such a ship and when. Turbines already existed, and it was already in the imminent future that they'd be used in ship propulsion. The names Titan/Titanic. The world was in the midst of an industrial revolution, and using Titan/Titanic as a noun or adjective to describe something tremendously big and powerful was common in the parlance of the time. Ford, Rockefeller, and even Astor, who died on Titanic, were known as titans of industry. Was Futility a good book? Spoiler warning greater than I think it's worth reading. The futile part of Futility was how a man that considered himself and his whole life a failure embraced a moral obligation to be a paternal role model and a comfort to a child. He took on that role despite the child being a symbol of how much of a failure he was. He did so knowing the likelihood that neither of them would survive. It was futile, but he did it anyways. ! Less than the targeted demographic for sales of Futility was people of 1898 making choices and decisions. The intent of Futility was to show those people how decisions they make now could affect them in 10 to 15 years. So, it would make sense to use general engineering forecasts of what life, particularly an ocean liner, would be in 10 to 15 years as a background. Much like the ship Titanic wasn't the point of Cameron's movie, obviously the love story of Jack and Rose was the point. The point of Futility wasn't the Titan. It was the main character, Roland, doing the right thing even if the circumstances made it seem to be a futile effort. Stanislav Petrov was a Soviet lieutenant known as the man who saved the world. Tensions were rising between the Soviet Union and the United States. So on the 26th of September in 1983, he was on duty for a nuclear early warning system. The system detected multiple missiles launched by the United States. But Petrov broke protocol, following his instincts by choosing not to report the danger to his higher-ups. The missiles turned out to be a false alarm, as he had thought, and, as Petrov's title suggests, he very well may have saved the world that day. Saving the world just off of a hunch definitely seems like something a time traveler might do. Seuss. Edit. Changed the 16th to the 26th. Isaac Brock's almost single-handed defense of Upper Canada from the US invasion in the War of 1812. You have a garrison of a few hundred British soldiers, the ones not good enough for the Napoleonic War. Withdraw to Halifax and try to hold the Maritimes. Fuck that. Okay natives, we don't like each other very much, but we're agreed the Americans are worse, right? Let's fight together. Hey farmers, you fled the revolution. They're coming to get you. Here's some guns, let's fight back. Forms an army in a matter of weeks out of nothing. Very well, Brock. You're outnumbered 3-1 on any given front and 10-1 in total. And you have to conquer Fort Detroit, which is entrenched, otherwise your SW flank will be open to counterattack. I'll write them a letter about how the natives with me will kill them horribly if the fort falls. And proceeds to march in a circle all night around the fort to build a sense of a larger force and let the fear settle in. Fort Detroit surrenders without a shot. Okay, nice try, Brock. But now Niagara is about to be invaded and you're 500 kilometers away. Shit, I better canoe up Lake Erie really fucking fast. And he fucking does it. Too late, Brock. They've crossed the river at the northern end and they have the high ground. Fuck that. Follow me, boys. Charges up the hill at the head of the column and rallies his untrained militia to force them off the ledge. He dies, to a goddamn cannonball blast straight to the chest. But the invasion is halted. Canada doesn't exist today if not for a balls to the walls British general in 1812 who in the span of 3 months single-handedly raises an army, defends 750 kilometers plus of warfront, and cements 2 victories over forces then outnumbered him 3-1 to 5-1. The Germans spent a lot of time and money developing a magnetic sea mine that probably would have significantly reduced England's ability to stay in the war, except they dropped a single one of the mines accidentally on an English beach, and also failed to arm it so none of the booby traps were active, and the British basically found out straight away how it worked and were able to cheaply build magnetic minesweepers. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Somebody throws a grenade at his car, and it blows up behind him. That's the first incident of time travel, stopping the assassination. Later, as he goes back, The driver realizes that he's on the same route where the grenade was thrown, and they try to turn around. The whole procession of cars stalls, and a guy who just happened to be sitting there goes over and shoots him. That's a second time traveler, fixing what the first had done. Since the whole thing lit off World War I and led to the rise of Hitler and then World War II, I kind of wonder what Ferdinand would have started if he hadn't been killed. It must have been pretty bad for them to send a second time traveler to put Nazi Germany back into the timeline. Richard Lawrence tried to assassinate Andrew Jackson, but both of the pistols he attempted to fire at him misfired. Then Jackson proceeded to beat this fellow with his cane. While the assassin was not a time traveler, one certainly could have sabotaged his pistols with a spritz of water on each. I'd say the Battle of Midway, the major turning point in the naval war in the Pacific. The battle destroyed the single most powerful naval strike force in history and shifted the balance of power to the US. The actual course of events during the Battle of Midway was a series of near misses for the US until, conveniently, two separate airstrike forces arrived at the same time to decimate 3 out of 4 Japanese aircraft carriers. Absolutely amazing providence. I remember a comment about a bumbling time traveler trying to kill Adolphe Sax, inventor of the saxophone, because they hate their sax lessons, and I can totally see it because of how many things that almost killed him.